my periods were so excessive that I remained anemic for 30 plus years. It was very, very traumatic for me. And I didn't even think about hot flashes because I thought I was too young. And my hot flashes just got progressively worse. I mean, it was a very miserable experience for me. Until I studied culinary medicine, I didn't understand the link between what I was eating and how I was making my hot flashes worse. And so 7 years ago, flashback, I'm about 50, and I changed my diet literally overnight.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Office Visits with Dr. V. Oh man, this new season, ladies, is exactly what you need. And it is my pleasure to help you with your women's health issues while applying some lifestyle medicine stuff, things that you can do within your control to help your condition, things that you don't even realize. And so I have a wonderful guest today who's going to help us address some of these things. And her specialty is really kind of in sleep and diet, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're probably asking, how can this relate to menopause or heavy periods or just kind of fatigue? You are about to find out. So I went to her website. And this is on her website when you first open up, and I love it. And I'm just going to read it. Want to look and feel better? Are you struggling to lose weight? Do you have problems sleeping? Are you tired of traditional medicine that addresses symptoms but not causes? Do you realize that you can prevent and reverse disease by making simple lifestyle changes? Would you like to avoid medication and finally achieve optimal health? You've come to the right place. All right, so that place is Sleep and Diet Restoration, and the owner and founder is Laurie Powers. Laurie, welcome to Office Visits with Dr. V.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh man, I'm excited to hear more of all of the great things you're doing. And guys, we talked before we start hit the record button. And y'all, she was getting ready to go into a good story. And I just had to pause her. So there's some things that I want to get to. But first, Laurie, please tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and why we should be listening to you about this stuff.
Okay, so my name is Laurie Powers. I've been a medical provider for 33 years. I went to University of Florida and studied speech and audiology, and I wound up going to PA school at Duke University 35 years ago. So that's kind of how I started. I was that nerdy science kid when I grew up, and I used to do science experiments in my closet, and I just knew that I wanted to do something medical, but I didn't necessarily want to go the MD route because I wanted to have a really flexible schedule so I could have kids. So that's kind of what I did. And I actually have 2 kids and now 2 grandchildren. So that's who I am and where I come from. And about 7 years ago, I was at a conference. We went to an annual conference at the place that I was employed at in psychiatry for something called Psych Congress, where we talked about all the newest things in psychiatry. And I guess I need to back up. So I'm a primary care PA. I actually practiced primary care for about 10 years. And then I did psychiatry for more than 20. And so during my psychiatric years, I would go to this conference every year. Awesome conference, highly recommend it. So one year they were talking about using food to treat psychiatric illnesses, and they were requesting that psychiatric providers go back to school for 2 years at Tulane University and get certified for certified culinary medical specialists. And I was like, using food instead of medication? And they were like, absolutely. And I was like, oh, that is so about me. So I decided to go back. Luckily, this was before COVID because I had to fly back and forth to New Orleans, which is where Tulane is. They have a huge cooking kitchen, which is the most fabulous part of the training. And it's all doctors, PAs, nurse practitioners, anybody with a medical license could get certified in culinary medicine. And you're being taught by different types of physicians that are also culinary medical specialists. And they put you in little tiny groups and you're in this huge cooking kitchen, and your group might be creating a meal for somebody with diabetes, and someone else is creating a meal for hypertension, and someone else is creating a meal for cancer. And then you
Love
get together
it.
and kind of talk about your mock patient, and you get to eat all the food and learn. They even have a garden, like where we picked like our fresh vegetables and herbs, and
Oh my
it
gosh.
was
Oh my
life-changing.
gosh.
So what Tulane is doing is they're trying to encourage every medical school in the United States to have this program. And
Yeah.
at the last count, I think they had 30 medical schools that were incorporating this into their medical training, which I think is brilliant because doctors get very little, if any, nutritional training.
Let me just jump in here real quick.
Yeah.
I graduated in 2002 from medical school, and nutrition was an elective. And it was a very popular elective because it was a cushy elective.
Right.
And so only like 1 or 2 people could get it per quarter.
Gosh.
So it was like, we didn't get it. We didn't get it. So you're learning about nutrition. Tell us how you kind of made the leap from nutrition, psychiatry. I'm going to start my practice to help people with their lifestyles to treat disease.
Right. Well, of course, COVID's going to come into the story, right? So this was 7 years ago before COVID. It took like 2.5 years by the time I got certified. And I was already practicing it. I was already using it, even though I couldn't really bill for it. Obviously, I was in psychiatry, but I was already using it. And my kids and my young adults were getting better. I was able to wean them off antidepressants, antipsychotics, all different types of ADHD medicines for sleep. And it was what I was always trying to do prior. Like I was never a big pharma person, but I didn't have all the tools to do it. So I wasn't always successful. So all of a sudden I was able to do that. And not only was I able to get them off their medicines, but they were losing weight. Their other chronic medical conditions were getting better. Their mood was better, their focus, their grades, everything was getting better.
So you said I was applying it. Is this just the nutrition piece at this point?
Or
were you also applying sleep? So it's just nutrition, just nutrition. By helping them eat better. Wow. Okay.
I didn't have the sleep. I didn't have the sleep training yet. So I hadn't gotten to that part. So I'm talking about, like 7, 6, 5, 4 years ago, something like that. And so when I saw how well people were doing physically and mentally, I was so excited, but I was still having to prescribe medication for sleep. No matter what food I did, you hear about turkey at Thanksgiving, and there are some foods that, milk, whatever. There's some foods that may have some sedative properties. It's not enough, There's really no magic food for sleep. I don't care what anyone says. I've tried it all. So then COVID hit, and I had a few job transitions over COVID. That's a different story. But I wound up in a sleep medicine clinic. And the sleep medicine clinic was super excited about my culinary medical skills because most patients with sleep apnea are obese. So they wanted someone to work with their patients to get them off their CPAP machines or, just to prevent sleep apnea in the first place.
Right.
But they wanted me to get certified in cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which I was able to do because I was already certified in psychiatry. So you have to be a psychologist or have a certification in psychiatry to get that education. So they wanted me to go back and do that. So luckily this was over COVID, so I was able to do that online. And I got that certification, and I started marrying the two together, my culinary medicine with the cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And it was magical, especially when I had motivated patients. Patients were dropping weight without even trying. They were sleeping better. I mean, it was so magical. And so I decided, wow, this is what I want to do. And I want to do it for myself and make my own hours and spend more time with my patients than what I was allotted. Because, a lot of doctors' offices only give you X amount of minutes. And so a year ago, June, I decided to open my own practice. So that's kind of where that came from.
So this podcast will be available for eternity. So that was June of 2022.
June
of 2022. Started.
Yeah.
Amazing. Exactly. So, okay. So I know this works, but let's talk about some issues that you have addressed with this marrying of sleep and diet. And, menopause, perimenopause. So I'm late 40s. So my peers are asking me about this menopause thing. And that was the story that you were getting ready to get into, like how you transitioned through menopause.
Right.
Then let us know, like, what you do for your patients potentially to help them with this transition.
So I come from a family history of women that have horrible menstrual cycles, horrible periods, and horrible, horrible menopause. So I was terrified of menopause. My mom went through menopause while she had breast cancer. So she was 40 when she had breast cancer and was already naturally going through menopause. So it wasn't created by her treatment. And it was terrifying to me because she lost her hair and we lived in Florida, and she would pull her wig off everywhere we went because when she had a hot flash, she had to, or she would pass out.
Oh my God.
And I was a teenager and I was like, whoa, mom's got her wig off again. I remember once at Disney World where she literally swooned and my dad had to catch her, with no wig on. So menopause to me was kind of a terrifying thought.
Wow.
And I was that kid who missed a day or two of school almost every month because my periods were so bad. And sadly, I had a daughter that followed right behind me. She's now 25. She did the same thing. My mom had done the same thing. And this sounds maybe too personal, but literally every single work chair I ever had was stained from blood. Like my periods were so excessive that I remained anemic for 30 plus years.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was very, very traumatic for me. So my hot flashes started one night. We were on vacation at the beach at Myrtle Beach. And we were in kind of a timeshare type of situation, and there were no ceiling fans. And I was used to sleeping with a ceiling fan, and there was no other type of fan there. And I woke up drenched in sweat, and I'm like, oh, it's got to be 85 degrees in here. And my husband's like, it's freezing in here. I don't know what you're talking about. And I didn't even think about hot flashes because I thought I was too young.
Yeah,
right?
you were young. Yeah.
Even though my mom had gone through it, I just wasn't thinking about that. I was like, oh yeah, 41, 40, this can't be happening. And my hot flashes just got progressively worse. I mean, it was a very miserable experience for me. The good news was my period started to get scantier.
I was going to say that helped.
Yeah. And that was good, but the hot flashes were horrible. And so until I studied culinary medicine, I didn't understand the link between what I was eating and how I was making my hot flashes worse instead of better.
Yes.
And so 7 years ago, flashback, I'm about 50 and I was still having the horrible hot flashes and still having all the, the symptoms. And I changed my diet literally overnight. Now, I don't recommend that for most people. I don't think most people probably even should change their diet overnight because my fiber content went up by times 4 probably. And for some people that would cause a lot of GI issues. But I'm the kind of person where I went home from my very first 1 week cooking lesson and came home and threw all the food away. And my husband was like, what's going on? This is really weird. Why are you doing this? And I said, listen, I have grocery shopped and cooked for 25 years for us, for the family. I was empty nesting that year. I said, it's time for me to take care of me. Now, if you want to add to what I'm cooking, you're welcome to do it. But this is what I'm cooking. And if you like it, I'm going to be super happy. I'm going to make it tasty. I'll take cooking classes. I'll do all the things to bring flavors, whatever you want to do. I said, but this is something that I have to do for me.
So you took him hostage. Okay.
I did. I took him hostage. And to this day, he's my biggest cheerleader. Like he's the first person. So it was really hard for him at first. For me, it was easy because once I read the studies, like I'm just a black and white person. I was like,
yeah,
but for him, he was like, oh. But then we got his blood back and I was able to get him off his statin and his liver was inflamed on his statin. And I dropped his total cholesterol and his LDL both by 80 points each.
Y'all, she's just talking about food.
Right. And he wasn't overweight. Yeah, he wasn't overweight. He's a triathleter. So he was a tall, skinny guy, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't that he was obese causing the hyperlipidemia, but it was what he was eating.
It's what he was eating.
Yeah. So when I changed it and he saw that, so now, I'm still doing the same thing. I still do most of the grocery shopping and the cooking. But when we eat out, I just keep my mouth zipped and he eats what he wants. But we don't eat out maybe once or twice a week. So I just keep it low key and I watch the heart attack on a plate meal. And I know that everything else he's eating is good. So his cholesterol's creeped up a little bit, but it's still not high enough to be on medication. I mean, he's doing fabulously.
So yay, this is what we need to hear. So you changed what you were eating. So for menopause, because menopause, heavy, painful periods, mood issues, issues, all of these things can be managed with diet and sleep. So what are maybe just 3 things that you changed that helped you with menopause?
It's interesting because for the heavy periods and the breast tenderness and the hot flashes, it's really the same diet. It's the same thing. The only thing that's different is there's a few foods that I add, believe it or not, during menopause that can be quite magical. Okay, so the diet is basically lowering saturated fat, especially. So saturated fat is anything that comes from an animal or other foods like coconut is high in saturated fat, and palm oil is high in saturated fat. And unfortunately, palm oil is everywhere because that's what they use in most processed foods.
It's all in there. Yeah. And I'll just add simply to kind of simplify that as well, that saturated fats are the ones that are solid at room temperature. So coconut oil is really kind of getting its shine on, but it definitely is a saturated fat because at room temperature, it's solid.
All plant-based oils have a mixture of good and bad fat in them. Okay, so there's going to be some good fats in coconut oil, but sadly for coconut oil, it has a lot more bad fat than it does have good fat. So it's just not something that I recommend that people consume on a regular basis. So, and for some people that are having severe hot flashes, I even go more extreme with the low fat. I even get into some of the things, if they're not responding, that are what we would consider good fats. So the olive oils, the olives, the nuts, the nut butters, you know, those things really limit them. And a lot of times if they're struggling and they can't get control of their hot flashes, that helps as well. But most of the time it's a saturated fat. Most of the time it's the animal products, especially because they're filled with hormones. And the biggest animal product that I
say that again. Hold on. Say that again. Say that again. Yes. Mostly it's the animal products because what, Laurie?
They're filled with hormones, especially dairy. And the people of color even more so have problems with dairy. Okay, so the problem is if you think about it, and you'd have to understand how they make dairy, but dairy comes from a pregnant cow and they impregnate that cow every single year so that she'll maintain her milk. Okay, and so the estrogen levels in that milk are sky high because they're meant for a 1,000-pound heifer. They're not meant for a human. So we are the only mammal that drinks the milk of another mammal. We're the only one.
Come on. If you guys have been listening to Dr. V, I have said that over and over and over again. That's it violates natural laws.
Right. And what I tell my patients is, would you drink cat milk? Would you drink elephant milk? If your dog was nursing puppies, would you drink that? I mean, think about it. It seems so
right.
So why does it seem okay that we drink cow's milk? It's just cultural.
And it's been marketed to be good for us. So it is cultural. And oh my goodness, this is where you get your calcium to have strong bones and teeth. So
well, I could go into that for an hour.
I was gonna say, let's not even go there. So
another time we'll talk about that because I want to talk about that another day. Because that makes me crazy.
Oh Lord. So saturated fats is something that you get rid of, and especially we're hitting on the dairy as well. What's something else that you add or eliminate to help with that?
So the second thing, so we take the fat down, okay, and 97% of Americans are getting too much protein. So people usually worry when I take the saturated fat down, since you're saying take milk and animal products down, I'm going to be protein deficient. That is a lie. So that is a lie from Big Pharma and the animal industry, because Big Pharma now owns most of our protein beverages and things like that. Okay, so that's not true. In fact, as a doctor, how many people have you seen that you ever thought had a low protein level from their blood work or right? Okay, so
now as an OBGYN, that's not something that I would check. But absolutely, you're right. That is not a deficiency that we run into. Absolutely. I agree.
Well, I spent a year in hematology oncology, and then I spent 23 years in psychiatry with a lot of eating disorders, even anorexia. The only people, and I did blood work on everybody, okay? And I checked their protein levels in their blood and all the things. The only people I ever saw that had a protein problem were cachectic from chemotherapy or cancer, or were extremely anorexic to the point where they probably needed to be admitted.
Hold on, Laurie. when we say medical words, I like to kind of, you said cachectic, which is one of my favorite
extremely
words.
underweight.
Right.
Yes.
Kind of wasted or
Yes,
wasting.
yes.
Yeah.
Holocaust
So,
victim like.
yeah.
Those people clearly are protein deficient, either because they're anorexic or because they're very, very sick, right? But the vast majority of us get too much protein. Even vegans get too much protein. Okay. So the protein myth is a lie. So when I decrease people's saturated fat, I have to tell them, don't listen to, all the commercials. Don't listen to YouTube and social media where they tell you you need to have more protein. That's just simply not true. And I'm actually having a conversation on social media right now with a psychiatrist who insists it's true. And I'm like, show me a study, just one study. Show me one patient that you have a lab that shows this. And he can't, because it's just not true. So I'm like, I can show you 100 studies, so show me one.
So that's another area, because as we get older, we lose muscle mass, and so that's where we're hearing, get protein. Right. But I don't want to go down there. So we said saturated fats, it's okay if we're not worrying about the protein
part. Right. Okay. And then when I take that away, what do I increase? Okay, so those are a lot of calories, right? In fact, fat has 9 calories per gram and carbs only have 4. So you're taking away a ton of calories. So all of a sudden, you get to eat a ton more food. Okay, and what more food am I recommending? Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans. So these are really awesome foods to increase. And then when you do that, what are you increasing? Fiber. Fiber is what we're deficient in. Just like 97% of Americans get too much protein, 97% of Americans get insufficient fiber. And that's why, because they're pushing the protein so hard, which makes us eat so much fat that we're not getting the fiber. And then they're trying to scare us away from carbs. I have so many women that come in that are eating 0 whole grains. And I always say, are you scared of carbs? Like after I take their diet history, they're like, oh yeah, I'm scared of carbs. 50% of every meal should be whole grains and good carbs.
So one of my, I have some principles that I just kind of say, this is just the way it is. Your body can heal itself, right? Your body can function if you give it what it needs. And so we do need, ladies and gentlemen, we do need carbohydrates. We absolutely do. Now, do you need them from, from the Doritos bag?
No,
maybe not, right?
But no, absolutely not. That's the palm oil. Absolutely not. And the food colorings and the flavorings and the artificial everything, preservatives.
Yes.
So the whole grains. So what I'm talking about is the old-fashioned oatmeal. It might take 5 minutes to cook, or if you get steel cut, it make 25 minutes to cook. We can make a pot, it'll last all week. I'm talking about brown rice. I'm talking about wild rice, even popcorn, depending on how you prepare it. So not the microwaved popcorn that's covered with artificial colors, flavorings, and plastic from the inside lining of the bag. Okay. So yeah, it's really a problem. So the whole grains, and people will say no bread. I say no. I like sprouted grain bread. So Ezekiel bread is my favorite bread. It's all sprouted grains. It's not made from the processed flours. So there's a ton of choices for whole grains. There are also whole grains that like millet and other grains that Americans don't eat a lot of.
I know
Quinoa,
barley, bulgur, quinoa,
yep. So
I just there's a lot that we don't know about food. And I will tell you, it's getting better. I went plant-based 2016. And I remember trying to look for some of these things like black rice. Oh my gosh, it was hard to find. Quinoa, you have to go to special stores, but now it's in every grocery store. So it's getting better. And if you continue to hang out with me, Laurie, you'll learn more about, what you can eat and what you can substitute, what you can add to help you feel better. So we're getting whole grains, we're reducing saturated fats and dairy. What about sugar? Because that's for menopause, heavy periods, all of those things. What's your take on sugar?
Processed foods in general, and sugar is a processed food. Okay, so processed foods in general are extremely inflammatory. And the inflammation could be heart, brain, it's just absolutely something that is unnecessary. I don't even consider it really a food. So you want to keep your sugar as low as possible. And some people will say, well, what about honey? Well, what about maple syrup? Well, what about, all these other sorts of sugars? Sugar is sugar. Okay, so there are some benefits to honey, honestly, but you'd have to eat so much honey to get the benefit.
Right, to get
Then
it.
now you've had too much sugar. Same thing with maple
Right.
syrup. So if I'm going to use a sweetener, it is going to be a less processed sugar like honey and things like that.
Right.
For me, not honey, but maple syrup. But in general, you want to keep your sugar low. Definitely.
And when we say process, so most of us are eating refined sugar, where they've made the sugar, they've kind of concentrated it, if you will, to a very, very super potent sweetener.
Right.
But when we say natural sweeteners, okay, you could pull out a honeycomb and get some honey. You could tap a tree and get maple syrup. But, some of the other things that are really just not found in nature and are really processed are still, and bleached, and they put all these things that they're still processed. So definitely keeping your sugar low. Okay, that's all good things. All good things.
Yeah. If you eat foods without labels the way God made the food, you don't have to worry about it. Like, people always want me to teach them to read a label, and I can teach you to read a label, but I try not to eat foods that have labels. An example would be, real oatmeal with real blueberries and real bananas. There's no label involved in that. Some cinnamon. Thinking like that. When you start thinking that way, then you're getting the less processed food. If man had to touch it and do a bunch of things to it, and there's a lot of ingredients and you don't know what they are, and sometimes I don't know what they are, we shouldn't be eating it.
We shouldn't eat it. It should not go in your
food.
body. It should not. Because your body's like, I don't know what this is. I wasn't designed to process this. Yeah. So thank you for stopping and saying that. Those are whole foods. They look like they came, you eat them in the same form that they came out of the ground or how they were grown. And I love saying that. Eat foods without labels. Now, maybe you got the little sticker from the produce, like the barcode, but that's the only
that's about it.
That should be on it. And listen, I know y'all, and I'm looking straight in the camera. I know y'all are like, oh yeah, that's fine and good, but you have to grocery shop. I know, and it takes time. I want you to have the knowledge, and the behavior change are things that we can help you with. Definitely, like she said, nobody does this, most people don't do this overnight, but this is what's best. And we have to get in our mindset that this is the standard, because if we want to feel better, this is the standard. So, okay.
And when you eat this way, when you really focus on fiber and you get your fat down, I tell my patients the preferred amount of saturated fat is 0. Most people aren't going to get there. Okay. But if they can get to 1, no more than 2 servings of saturated fat a day, there is frequently dramatic improvement.
Wow.
Okay? And then eating as many fruits and vegetables as you want. Okay. So as long as they're not fried or covered in cheese and butter, you can have more about all of that. And so you're never hungry. And the weight, and most of my patients are very sick and older, diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, cancer.
Right.
They're also obese. Their weight falls off and they can't believe it. They're like, oh my gosh, like I've been dieting my whole life and I've been stuck with this 50, 100 pounds. Yes. And it's just, every time they come in, and I don't even make them weigh. I don't believe in scales. I don't believe in counting calories, but their clothes are falling off. Like it is so gratifying. And then one other thing, I actually have a hot dog in my office. It's 15 years old. I bought it at a very well-known hot dog establishment here in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I have a friend who has a full-on Happy Meal, like the fries, cheeseburger, the whole thing, that's 25 years old. I mean, this hot dog, I have their receipt on the lid. Okay. This hot dog literally sat in my garage on a plate all summer. Even the bugs didn't touch it. Okay. Look at the bread. I mean, you can tell, like, there's no mold, nothing happened to it. And then I put it in my attic for years because I kind of forgot about it. We moved. And so in 200-degree heat, probably in the summer, I mean, and it's still,
hands down, that is the best example of what a processed food is.
Yeah, that's a processed food. And I have tons of ways to teach people how to make their produce last longer. I can teach people how to choose ripe versus not ripe, which fruit will ripen on the counter, which won't, how to rotate your refrigerator, how to clean them. Like
Yes,
using
yes,
vinegar
yes,
kills the
yes.
fungus on berries. They last so much longer.
Oh
You know,
my
how to
God.
store things like cilantro. Like there's so many things you can do. I almost never have food waste. I mean, I have to
Wow.
look in my refrigerator every day and I rotate things. And sometimes if I don't have time, I'll freeze it. I'm like, I don't have time to cook you broccoli, but you're going to be just as healthy frozen because it's unprocessed. So I cut it up, throw it in the freezer. It's so much cheaper to eat this way, you guys. So much cheaper. I can't
Love
even
it.
tell you how much money I save every
I
month.
know. I know. Meat is expensive.
It's and meat, cheese, milk, all the processed
Yeah.
foods, that is where you're spending your money. If you stay on the outside of the grocery store where things aren't processed, and especially if you buy what's in season, what's on sale. Oh my, like anytime like the berries are on sale, I stock my freezer. Anytime the broccoli's on sale, I buy extra and freeze some. I mean, just if you think like that and think about rice and beans and how cheap they are, even the better rices are way cheaper than all the processed food.
So this is why we need more practitioners and health coaches and people that can guide us in these areas, because there's so much information that we just don't know.
Right.
And so I encourage you guys, to reach out to Laurie or, anybody in your area, because, even if you're taking notes on this from this episode, you really need to know how to apply it. And like she said, if you go buy up the whole store with produce, it might go to waste. So when you talk about weight loss, I just want to put this little nugget in there with Wegovy and Ozempic. And they're talking about, feeling full, which the medical term is satiety. And it's messing with your hormones, the ghrelin and the leptin.
Yep.
These whole food, plant-based diets naturally affect those hormones. So I know someone who's spending $100 a week for one injection.
Oh, I know people that are spending more than that.
I've
had
look,
patients
I
come to
let her
me.
know she's got a
Yep.
discount.
Yes. It can be
Yeah.
$700 a month for those.
Right.
$700.
$700 as opposed to what your produce bill would be at the grocery store.
That's way more than I spend on groceries a month for my husband and I.
I want our episode to be complete because look, I promised the people sleep and diet. So tell us about sleep, how that helps, because sleep is a huge thing in menopause for sure. And then, also with menstrual issues and, brain fog and anxiety. Tell us what you know about sleep and how you can help us with some of these conditions by adjusting that.
Okay, so the most important thing that I'm going to say about sleep is probably not what you expect. The most important thing is you have to make sure you don't have sleep apnea, guys. Okay, and the doctors, no offense, Dr. B, the doctors aren't screening for sleep apnea. They don't know much about sleep apnea. That's not in their wheelhouse. It's not at the top of their list. They have a million things to talk to you about, and that's not usually in the list. Okay. Here's the scariest part and what really shook me the last 3 years since I've been doing sleep medicine. Almost every single person that I test for sleep apnea is positive. I mean, It blows my mind.
Wow.
So there's a screening tool that we use in sleep medicine. It's called the STOP bang. So it's an acronym. So each letter stands for a symptom. And if insurance companies, obviously, they kind of rule us. They rule the world, right?
I was getting that was my next question, but go ahead.
Yep. So they like to see the stop bang, and most of them won't pay for a sleep apnea test unless you have 3 out of 8 points. Okay. So, but most patients do. So here's what stop bang stands for. So the S is for snoring, and it has to be moderately loud, which means anybody can hear it in the room that you're sleeping. Okay, so that's the big one. The T is for tired, so low energy, okay, or sleepiness, okay, meaning you can't keep your eyes open. So, but that also could be narcolepsy, and there's a separate screening for that. Okay, then O is what we call observed apneas. Apneas are pausing and breathing when you sleep. And that is the hallmark of sleep apnea, but not everybody sees that because either they don't have a partner or their partner's asleep, so they don't see it, right? But some people do, okay? Then there's P for high blood pressure. If you have high blood pressure and you have 2 of these other risk factors, you need to be screened for sleep apnea. So listen up, because the majority of Americans at certain ages have high blood pressure anymore, right? Okay. So B is BMI. So if you're obese, you're especially if you're what we call class 2 obese, so that's a higher BMI, but any type of overweight can increase your risk. Okay, so you have to pay attention to that. A is age, so 50 and up, okay, which probably a lot of your patients are 50 and up, right? N is neck size. So most people don't know their neck size. So if you take a tape measure as if you're going to button a button right here, not any tighter than that, just like you're going to button a button, okay? For a woman, it's 16. So 16 and higher. For men, it's 17. And so I live in Fayetteville, so most people I see, a lot of them are military. They know that measurement, but other people don't always know. So just get a tape measure, pretend like you're buttoning a shirt. And if you're 16 or higher, that is a risk factor. And then G is for gender, which is more common in males, but I see a ton of women that have sleep apnea.
Wow.
Okay. So you can see how that can add up. So if you're over 50, and you have high blood pressure, you only need one other symptom and you need a sleep test. And
I was going to say, if you're over 50 and you're a man, right?
Yes, just one other. If you have moderate snoring, okay?
Wow.
Yeah, consistently moderate snoring. So it doesn't take much. And I'm going to be honest, I've been ordering sleep tests for 3 years. When I order them and I screen them, there's some other questions I ask too. There's a whole question, but those are the primary. I haven't had one come back negative yet. So that's how common it is when you do the stopping and you get those. So that's the most important thing, because so many people have it. And if you have untreated sleep apnea, it increases your risk of heart enlargement or even sudden death. So you have to take it seriously. It means that your brain and your vital organs lose oxygen all night long.
Wow. So these people, I mean, usually, you do hear about the person who snores. So I'm so glad that you went through the whole kind of symptom list, because we're thinking, I know I used to think, oh, it's overweight people, but you can have skinny people.
Oh no, I have skinny apnea people.
For sure. Absolutely.
Because there are other reasons. So it could be genetic, like you just have laxity here, even though you're not very heavy or big. It could be your tonsils and adenoids, especially for younger people, or a nasal septal deformity, or polyps in the nose. There's so many things. Like, it's not just obesity, but obesity is a huge risk factor.
So, okay, y'all, I know you all probably have potentially health insurance. And like she said, these things have to get paid for. They have to meet certain criteria. So if you have 3 out of the 8, that is something that you can discuss with your provider. I don't know that this is a common screening test. And again, I'm kind of primary care as an OBGYN, but I don't hear of this as a routine screening. So all right. So people who have undiagnosed sleep apnea, they're probably having issues with insomnia, or they're feeling tired throughout the day. What are some other things, as far as after we say, okay, you've got sleep apnea potentially, what are other things or other aspects of sleep that we need to be aware of?
Okay, and I'm going to pause on the sleep apnea thought. Just because you have sleep apnea doesn't mean you can't also have insomnia, and vice versa. And so insomnia is a separate diagnosis with a separate treatment plan. Okay. But if you feel like you're not getting good quality sleep, or you feel unrested, you feel tired, you have these risk factors, get tested. But even if you get treated for sleep apnea, you could still have insomnia, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So I'm kind of making that distinction. So the first thing I do is I screen them for sleep apnea. The second thing I do is I screen them for anything medical that could be going on that may be unrelated. So the things that I usually screen for, I have a sleep panel. I also have a nutrition panel, and they do merge in some places, but they're depending on the patient. I check their thyroid, so the TSH and things like that, and make sure that all that is normal. I check their vitamin D. I don't know if you've talked about vitamin D. I could talk about vitamin D.
Yes, love vitamin D.
Oh my gosh, almost every single patient I test is deficient in vitamin D. Okay, so I test vitamin D. I don't just check iron and CBC, but I check the ferritin, the stored iron. Do you do that with your gal?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well,
absolutely, because heavy periods,
huge. Yep. Right? It needs to be 80 for best sleep. I don't know if you knew that. 80.
I use 50, above 50, but 80. Okay. Let's
For
go.
best sleep, 80. For vitamin D, 60. And
Yeah.
that's not what most primary cares are doing. So when you push it up, sometimes it's miraculous, the better sleep they get. And then I also check B12. So most people think of B12 as just a vegan problem, but it's not, because your absorption of B12 decreases the older you get. So if you're over 50, you probably need your B12 checked. If you're vegan, obviously everybody needs to be on B12 if they're vegan, vegetarian.
Right.
And then magnesium, which if you're eating a plant-based diet or you're eating your fruits and veggies, you shouldn't be low in magnesium, but most Americans aren't eating that way. So magnesium is another thing that can cause problems with sleep. So I check all these things, I tweak these things with diet, with supplements, whatever I have to do there. And then I do cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia for my adults. For kids, the little kids, you can't do cognitive behavioral. It's more behavioral therapy for kids.
Okay.
So cognitive behavioral therapy is usually 4 sessions. It's 80% effective in 4 appointments, which I think is dramatic. Think about your medications, how long it might take to adjust a medication, and then eventually you become tolerant to it and they don't work anymore. Then you have to try something else and they have side effects and all that.
Wow.
The beauty of CBTI is it only takes 4 appointments for most people, and it gets better with time because it's like practicing something. It gets better and better and better. And so that's why I think most therapists don't get trained in CBTI, because they lose their patients quickly. You see what I'm saying? So I am the only one in Fayetteville that does it. And if you're a therapist, right? If you're a therapist, who wants to lose their patients in 4 appointments?
Wow.
I usually keep them because I keep them for nutrition for some period of time, but I don't keep even those forever. Once they've got it, they've got it. And I might check them, once or twice a year after that and make sure they're staying with it. But yeah.
That kind of sounds like why we don't have a cure for cancer, because but anyway.
Yeah, big pharma.
Wow. We're not gonna have you can't monetize a cure. Like once you get rid of it,
right.
The money dries up. Okay. So I just, there's a lot that I don't know, and a lot that you just shared with us. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Sleep apnea, cognitive behavioral therapy, checking other medical. Oh, that was the question I had. Because we want these things to be practical, right? So people can take it to their doctors. I know that insurance does not pay for screening for vitamin D. I will usually use the code fatigue.
Yes. Malaise, fatigue.
Yeah. That's the one that I use.
Yeah. You have to know how to code it.
Yes.
I usually have 15 diagnoses on my lab slips. They usually lab it, because I spend 2 hours with my new patients. So I really, by the time I order their labs, I know them. I know every complaint they have, and I know how to use those complaints to get my lab.
You get it covered. And so that's what I want to tell you folks, you want to get these things tested, but your insurance company is not going to pay for us to check it just because we want to check it. You have to have a problem for them to pay for it. And so, physicians are getting, even traditional physicians are getting wiser about how to do these things and get things paid for. So
can I say something about that though?
You sure can.
There's 2 points. I think most medical doctors don't test for things they don't know anything about. In other words, if they don't know what to do with it, they're not going to test it. And so many doctors still don't know about vitamin D. And so I can't even tell you how many primary care doctors, even neurologists, like I had a patient the other day, which, with a kid with migraines, they should be checking that. If they don't know what to do with it, why would they test it? They don't know how to interpret it. So that's part of the problem. Now, here's the beauty though. There is this, and I get no money from telling you this. There's a website called lifeextension.com. You can order all your own labs for free. Don't need a doctor. And I check my vitamin D for $50 twice a year, just because I don't want to bother my doctor and I want to get my results myself, and I want to titrate it myself. So she buys into the vitamin D thing. She's pretty holistic, but I just do it myself. So it's $50 twice a year. I usually do it midsummer and midwinter, just because I do garden and I do walk, and I need a little bit.
Yeah. And I will say this for people of color, everybody says, oh, go out in the sunlight, but we have natural SPF to block the sunlight that you need to make the vitamin D. So if you got any tan to your skin, if you're olive, just understand that it's going to be a little bit more difficult for you to get the vitamin D via sunlight. So,
And I'm the
yeah,
whitest white girl there is.
I was gonna say, yeah,
And I literally sit outside at lunch every day for 10 or 15 minutes because I want to touch the earth and get the sun on that person, right? And I garden and I walk, and I still have to take 5,000 international units of vitamin D every day to keep mine at 80, which is where I want it for best sleep. But also, we can have another talk about this for COVID protection, for your immune system, for the flu. In other countries where they cared, I could go into that, like the Netherlands, they tested people's vitamin D for free, and they gave out vitamin D for free, and their COVID numbers
Oh my
were nothing
gosh.
compared to ours. Nothing compared to ours. And those are some white people over there. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
They don't get as much sun as we do. So the long and the short of it is, we're back in flu season. You got to get your vitamin D up. If you haven't had it checked, get it checked. Now it needs to be 60 just because the lab says that 30 is fine.
30 is right.
30 is average. I don't want to be average. When I took calculus, I didn't want to have a C. That's average. We want to be optimal.
Right.
Okay. For sleep, for our immune system, for our mood.
Come on and say that, because part of, I forget what it is, the Portability Act, I think it is, where patients are now getting their lab results. Like that is your right to have your lab results.
And you should.
So, you should. Absolutely. But sometimes, especially pregnant women, the normal value does not apply to you in your particular situation. So if you're trying to address sleep and it's like, oh, my vitamin D is 31, I'm normal. No, it should be above 60. It should be above 80. And so you have the labs, but you still want to partner with someone who really knows where those values should be.
Right.
Because it's not always what you see on the piece of paper, or now we're on the computer, what you see on the screen. So, man, okay. I'm just gonna say, I before we got on, I said, Laurie, you probably want to consider having a podcast, like, because you're dropping dimes, like, for real. And I just think that this is the information that people need to know so that they can help themselves. If they knew, I've got to just take 5,000 international units of vitamin D a day, then, that's something that we could implement easily. And
but that's what I have to take, guys. That's what
I was getting ready to say.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You can say
you might need 1,000 or 2,000, and I have some patients that need 10,000.
Yes.
And the darker skinned people their vitamin Ds are in the toilet. Some of them are 8, 7, 9. They're horrible.
I was 14. I think I got down to 9. Yeah.
They're so much lower than even Caucasians. Yeah. Mine runs like high 20s, low 30s. So, when I don't take anything, and that's too low.
So, let me just say, and it's always at the end of the podcast, this is general information. So you really want to work with a healthcare provider who really knows this stuff and knows you, most importantly. But you want to have the knowledge that you need to have your vitamin D checked, right? And so that's what we're here for. The dosages and how often you should take it, that's between you and your medical provider. So, man, you've dropped a lot of information. Just give us, as we close out, one word of encouragement or one recommendation that you have to live a healthier and happier life.
Ooh,
I know that's hard. I know. Okay. Give us a mantra or, something that you kind of tell all of your patients.
The way that I try to live my life is as close to the earth as I can. And I know that sounds hippie and 70s, and that's my generation. But everything that I do, I don't want to eat and drink plastic. I don't want to breathe Lysol and chemicals. I don't want to put beauty products on my skin, my largest organ, that get absorbed into my body and fill me with chemicals. I don't want to take pharmaceuticals unless I absolutely have to. I want to try everything else first, especially sleeping medicines, because your brain is a self-cleaning oven, and it doesn't clean itself when you're forced into a sleep cycle. And so that can increase your risk of dementia. That's another story. So everything that I do, I want to breathe clean air every day. I want to touch the earth every day. I want to drink real clean water. I have reverse osmosis water. I don't drink from plastic. Everything that I do, I think, is that going to hurt me or is it going to heal me? And it's food, it's air, it's water, it's hand lotion, it's the soap in my bathroom. all of it. I make all my own cleaning products. So it's literally about how can I don't want to live forever. I can't wait to go to heaven. Okay. But while I'm here, I want to feel like I'm a teenager, like I do now. So I can do all the things and help the people and do what God's will is for me. And when it's my time, I'll go, but I don't want to be sick. And most people my age are sick.
Most people your age, but we can go on down to children as well.
Right.
So most Americans have a lot of these issues because of what we eat and how we live. And so that is wonderful. Eat as close to nature as eat and live as close to nature as possible. And guys, I know that, you know, you probably are not going to be at the level of Laurie right now, but it's a process and you can get there. And
I wasn't always this way. Yeah, that's what
I was gonna say.
Yeah, that's why my hot flashes have gotten better. I've cleaned all these things up, and now every now and then I'll go, it might be a little warm in here. That's about it. I'm not even sure if it's a hot flash. Like that's how different it is now compared to what it was.
That's what we're talking about. Okay. So when you know better, you do better. And y'all, you got a lot of knowledge here. So you know a lot more now. So I'm expecting big things out of you. I'm expecting better. So Laurie, real quick, how can our listeners contact you, follow you on social media?
So I'm only really on Instagram, sleep and diet restoration. But the best way if you want to make an appointment or get more information, I'm actually on Psychology Today under psychiatry. They give you a lot of room to show pictures and tell who you are. That's probably the best way to kind of see who I am. My website has less information because there's only so many characters allowed on my website, but it's sleepanddiet.com, just like it sounds, sleepanddiet.com.
Yeah. All right. And we'll have all of that information in the show notes. So thank you so much for coming on. And let me just give a shout out to my patient, Sarah. She was the one that said, you might want to have this lady on your show. So thank you so much, because yes, we are kindred spirits. We are definitely kindred spirits. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this. Share this episode. This was really good. And we will see you back on another episode of Office Visits with Dr. V. See you next time.
Thank you.